I would like to spend a few minutes of your time talking about a different way to look at COVID-19 infection rates. There's an old saying that there's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. Well, I guess there's going to be a lot of statistics in this. The statistics I used all came from Google. I used Google for the geographic sizing information that you'll see. I would type in something like United States size and square miles, and I'd get the numbers. And then for the COVID-19 numbers, I used Google as well. And if you type in like U.S. COVID-19 cases or Maryland COVID-19 cases, you get a real handy graphic that you can use to navigate around infection rates. It looks something like this. This is what I got when I did for the UK. So it's got the necessary numbers that I used for this video broadcast. Now, from my perspective, the right way to look at COVID infection rates is to look at it from a viewpoint of population density. In simple terms, population density is the number of people that lives in a square unit area, and in this case, I used per square mile, but you can use kilometer or furlongs per fortnight for all I care. But you can use whatever you want. I use square mile for this analysis. Now, the table that I'll use through this entire presentation is this one here, and I'll update it as I talk through different ways of measuring the information. Now, to start with, let's start with you have a theoretical proposition for you where you could move to one of two different counties. And if I told you that County 1 was 18,158 square miles, and that's a real county size, by the way, and it had 50,000 cases of COVID-19 there and 2,000 deaths. Both of those last numbers are just made up. And I said, if you compared that with County 2, it's only 12 square acres, and they've only had 100 cases and 5 deaths, and I said, pick a county, you would probably pick County 2 because the case count is only 100 and they haven't had that many people die from it. But I would argue that the best way to look at it is on a per square mile basis, or another way to say it is population density. And if you looked at the population density closer, you might find people living in apartment buildings like this where they're packed on top of each other, so that social distancing is very different. So using this table, if I said look at the population density, you would come up with numbers like this, where the cases per square mile in County 1 is 2.75, but County 2 is a much higher number at 8.33. And the deaths are radically different in that there's deaths per square mile of 0.11 in County 1 and 0.42 in County 2. Now, if you look at it from a percent perspective, I'm always going to use the first line in this table as the reference point. And so from a reference point, if you looked at County 2, you'd see that the percentage of cases in County 2 is 300% higher than County 1, and the death rate is almost 400% higher than County 1. A little sidebar here. 100% would be equivalent, the same number. 50% would be only half the number, and 500% would be 5 times the number. So just remember that as we move forward. And also, if you're looking at the math, remember that these numbers are rounded. I did them in Excel. So if you think you're seeing any errors, you're just seeing the fact that I'm not showing 10 decimal places that Excel would show. But anyway, we'll start the map out by looking at the U.S. at 3.8 million square miles of landmass. They've got about 524,000 cases, and the death count when I looked on the 11th was 20,601. So that's 0.14 cases per square mile and 0.005 deaths per square mile. Italy They were talking in the news saying, oh, isn't it horrible that the U.S. has a higher death count than Italy? Well, that's true. If you look at these numbers, you can see that 20,601 is definitely higher than 19,468. And the UK smaller than Italy, but the case count is smaller at 78,991, and the death count is also lower at 9,875. So if we plug in the information for cases per square mile and deaths per square mile, and then you look at it from a percentage, you can see that because of population density, the percent of cases per square mile is 950% higher than the U.S. and 3,146 times higher in deaths per square mile. And the U.K. also shows these accelerated or higher numbers, where the percent of cases per square mile is 611% of what the U.S. is, and almost 2,000% higher than the U.S. when you look at the percentage of deaths per square mile. So I decided to also look not only at countries, but also in my own neighborhood in Maryland. So if I look to where I live down in St. Mary's County, we are sized per Google at 764 square miles. We've had 73 cases, no deaths yet, thank goodness. And you can see that the cases per square mile at 0.1 and the deaths per square mile, well, at 0, are definitely lower than the U.S. numbers as an average. And if I look at it from a percent perspective, you can see that that's only 69% of the U.S., so lower, and 0, obviously lower. Now in the neighborhood, they talk about hotspots in Maryland. One of those hotspots is Montgomery County. Montgomery County at 507 square miles, you can see with the number of cases they've had and the number of deaths they've had, that those numbers are significantly higher than the U.S. average. Almost 22 times higher in the case count, and almost we'll call it 13 times higher in the deaths per square mile. Another hotspot area is Prince George's County, PG County, and that has equally alarming numbers. Almost 28 times the U.S. average, and almost 19 times the U.S. average in deaths. An area that they don't talk about a whole lot is Baltimore County, and I did the analysis of Baltimore County, and then I used Baltimore County combined with Baltimore City, and the numbers pretty much are the same. So in Baltimore County, you can see here that the numbers are even higher than Montgomery County and Prince George's County, with almost 66 times the U.S. average in number of cases, and in the number of deaths, it's almost 38 times higher than the U.S. average. Then I went up the road into Philadelphia and looked at Philadelphia County, and you see even higher numbers at almost 280 times the U.S. average from a case count perspective, and over 144 times the death rate on a per square mile basis when you compare that against the U.S. average. If you look at Montgomery County versus Philadelphia County, I was shocked to realize that there's approximately a 10 times increase in case rate and death rate between those two counties when you look at it from a viewpoint of population density. Now I wanted to look at New York, but New York is very difficult to extract the numbers, at least for me, because I'm not that familiar with the area. So I looked at a map, and between New York City and New York County, sometimes the numbers are mixed up. So I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to pick two counties that's around New York. I picked Westchester and Nassau counties and plugged those in. And when I plugged those in, you can see here, case count, death count, very, very high. And when you look at the percentages, you can see just as bad as Philadelphia at 26,000% increase in cases and 14,000% increase in death rate on a per capita basis. And Nassau County, even worse than that, at 34,000 and 29,000. I was curious about Washington, D.C., and those numbers are equally alarming. While the absolute case count number and death count number are lower, because Washington, D.C. is a very small metropolitan area, the percent of cases per square mile and the percent of deaths per square mile are well above the U.S. average and equally alarming. When you consider these numbers, and then you look back at the earlier slide where I show Italy and the UK, you can see that the numbers are pretty scary.